Now I'd like to go ahead and introduce Cami, who is the CEO of Zoetica Media. Cami is a digital strategist, speaker, and author of several books. Cami speaks nationwide on social media measurement, influence, and strategy, and has earned several awards for her work. So without further ado, Cami, please go ahead and begin.
Hi, it's great to be with you here today on this Social Media Day theme. I am going to be talking today about building social media campaigns that produce measurable outcomes, and I will give you some case studies that we have actually been a part of, a few of them, and some that I know of throughout my career that just talks a little bit about how researchers are using social media to connect with other researchers and in the field. This is a little bit about me, and thank you, Stephen, for already kind of giving me the bio, but if you need to get in touch with me, here's some information about me. If you want to contact me afterwards and you have maybe some further questions, please feel free to do so using these methods. So the first thing I'm going to say is that one of the reasons that you really want to use social media in getting the word out about your research and about your programs and practices is that you want to be where the people are. And really out there right now, Facebook is definitely the big thing at the moment. People are all on Facebook. It's harder to reach people in a more broadcast way on Facebook, whereas Twitter sometimes can be a little bit easier. And we're going to have a case study about Twitter in just a little bit that I'm going to explain to you. But these different tools only become important if people that you are interested in connecting with are on them. So one of the things that I would recommend that you do is find out, who is on those platforms before you spend all your time on a million platforms. Really focusing on one or two that make sense for your audience is really where I would start to begin with social media. Always start with the people, though, because it's not about what you're trying to get out, what you're trying to do. It's more about what you can bring to the party, and I'll talk a little bit more about all of those types of things here in a minute. There are a lot of specialty communities out there, too, and I just wanted to mention ResearchGate. I don't know how many of you are on ResearchGate. You can tell me in the chat if you are, to say, yes, I know all about ResearchGate. That'd be great. And one of the things that I wanted to also make sure that if you are on Twitter today, you can also use the hashtag. Somebody said that at the beginning. That's very good. And the hashtag just went away from me. But it is, and I'll find it again. I'll let you know. But anyway, I'm on Twitter, so if you use the hashtag today, I will definitely respond to you. So specialty communities are really important because they really digest who's going to be looking at your stuff. So ResearchGate is one that if you don't know about it, you should definitely take some time and sign up for it because you can put your research there. People can find your research. You can share your research with other researchers. So this is the place where you can connect with other researchers, and that becomes really interesting. And actually, I'm going to bring some of that up in a case study I'm about to tell you about in a minute. Some say that ResearchGate is very helpful. That's right, Carol. Thanks. Jessica says ResearchGate is a good tool for librarians to connect researchers. Very good. It's a great place to find research. So I'm going to do a poll question now, and I guess it's in here. So could you guys put it up for me? I'm going to ask you a little bit about yourself because I want this to be somewhat interactive, considering that I can't hear you and I can't see your faces. And usually when I'm in an audience, I look at you and I will look you in the eye and see how you're doing and if we're on the right track. So I just wanted to know, do you currently use social media professionally? And 70%, wow, very high, more than I thought it would be. Good. I guess you're also here, so there is a bias today in my study, right? While you're answering that question, I do also want you to know that I looked at a couple of surveys about how researchers are using social media, and one that came from the journal Nature said that researchers mostly use social media to share and collaborate with their peers about their research and discover the research of others, like the ResearchGate site. And it said only 20% do not use social media professionally. So I just wanted to see how we would line up with those numbers. Okay, so we're a little bit, 27%. We have a little bit of a margin of error, I guess you could say. Good. Okay, so I think that'll probably be good. Great. So we're not too far off of the others, so I think that's kind of cool. I like to research anytime I can. Going from that then, if you're not using it professionally, I would like, I'm going to go too fast. I would like to, at the end of this presentation, maybe give you some good reasons for you to start using it professionally or see it as a professional tool that you can use. You may not be like the biggest Twitter person in the world or Facebook person. My husband is an engineer and he doesn't even want to touch any of the social media, but he is on LinkedIn. So there are networks for you out there. Maybe ResearchGate is your network. At the end of this, I would hope that our group will have shifted a bit, and I didn't put a poll in for that. We should have done that. How many will use it professionally? If we can do that on the fly, that would be awesome at the end. Anyway, so the goal is that we want to reach the people, right? And I talked to you about that in the couple slides back. And this is a way that we set up our approach to social media. We call it the goalpost method. And what we'll do is we'll look at what our goal is. Why are you using social media? So not everybody is going to need social media for every single thing. And I don't expect for you guys to become marketing professionals after this call. But what I do want you to do is look at the goals for using social media. Why are you using it? And who are the people that you're trying to reach? Write these down. Say, okay, here's what we're trying to accomplish. We want to get out the word about this particular research, or I want to reach out to my peers and I want to connect with them to find out what other people are doing in this field, or it could be that you need to actually have a public do something, like maybe you're doing some research and you need people to become a part of that research, and we'll talk all about that in some case studies I have coming up. So people become very important. Who are you trying to reach? Peers? Are you trying to reach people that your research impacts? Are you trying to reach people that pay the bills, like the state legislatures, that maybe you need a grant? What are the things that you're trying to do through social media? And then your second piece of the post is O, which is objective. And you can have a really vague goal, like we want to reach more research participants. But you also need some objectives. This is also, in a way, scientific. You need to say what you want and by when. How many by when? What do you want to accomplish by when? Like, I want this many people to sign up for my study, or I want this many people to come and look at our website, or I want this many people to connect with me about research, or whatever it is. It can be people that is your objective. It can be some kind of outcome. You want to have an outcome goal here. And then strategy. So now you know who the people are you're going to reach. Now you know what your objectives are. And so now what will your strategy be to reach those people and meet those objectives? And inside of that strategy are things like an informational campaign or a research exchange, or what is your strategy going to be? I'm going to release my research and get feedback. My strategy might be I'm going to release a poll and try to get people to work with me to take that. And then you'll have to talk underneath those strategies have to be the tactics that you'll use to upload those. So what social media platform are you going to be on to do this? How are you going to manage the inflow of people if you're going to be starting to talk to people? Those tactical pieces. What are you going to say? What is the tone of your channel going to be? I call social media channels because it's not too different than any other kind of communication channel like email or texting or television. They all are channels, and we have to decide how we're going to communicate. And even if you're not a marketing and public relations professional like me, you have to have ways to communicate, and that becomes very important in your career and in what you do. So I love it. I have people over here connecting researchers and community. Okay, so we have people over here already doing their objectives and strategies. So if you guys want to share them in your chat, what your objective would be and what your strategy would be, that would be awesome. So you can learn from each other today. That'd be great. I'm watching that a little bit. And then you measure, and then you're going to measure that and repeat. So if you have really strong objectives, what's going to happen with those objectives is you're going to be able to see when you make it, whenever you cross the finish line. So if you know what your direct objectives are, you've outlined them. I call them SMART objectives. If you outline your SMART objectives, then you are going to know when you have been successful. And you can ask yourself, what would make me successful? And that's my next big slide. What is your vision? What is your goal? So here's a couple of ideas for your goal. Connect with your colleagues. get support for your research. Conduct primary research. You can do that in social media. You can even, to some degree, you can even make it representative, but it does have some bias. So if you're going to do online research, you need to make sure that the public that you're researching is mostly online. Something else, what else would be your goal? I'd love to see some goals on the site. Does anybody else have a goal? Let's see. I would like to create, let me read Mary Jo's. We want to connect researchers and community of SCI and accelerate the potential for change and cure. That's a really good goal. Support colleagues in implementing research-supported strategies in my niche area. Good. Thanks, Carol. Susan, recruitment of participants. We're going to talk about that today. Carrie, disseminate research findings to various audiences. That's a good one. So those are good goals. Good job, guys. Very good. So here's my next poll then. Which of these goals we just discussed is most interesting to you? And it could be something else. I know I'm not going to get all your guys' goals. That's good. Something else. Good. Excellent. And I'm going to guess that something else is going to win. I'm just making predictions here. Something else and connect with colleagues are kind of together. Good. And once you've hit something else, what I want you to do is, if there's something else you haven't given me yet in the sidebar, please go ahead and let me know what your something else is. I want name recognition for our center and the UCEDD network and the community. Good. Disseminate research. We already did that. Good. Excellent. All right. Are we still moving on the goals? Oh, yeah, we're still moving a little bit. I'll give you guys one more minute, not even that, 30 seconds. Do 30 seconds. All right, so while we're doing that, you can see that goals are going to be a really important part of what you're going to do, especially when you think about social media, because a lot of people will just open up a Facebook account because they say, well, we need a Facebook. They told us we need a Facebook account. So could you open up a Facebook account for me? I get clients all the time that come to me with that request, and I always say, well, let's stack that up. What do you want to do with that Facebook account? What are you going to do? And so it really becomes critical that you understand what your goal is. Just, let me stay on the side here. Okay, I think we're done now with this particular poll. And it looks like, again, colleagues are a really important part of what you guys are going to be wanting to do. So let me tell you about one of our clients that we worked with on getting a social media strategy set up. And we launched this really great program called For Our Babies. And Paul Lally is a researcher out in California. And I don't know if any of you know who he is. If you do, let me know in the sidebar so I can know that you guys know what I'm talking about. But he is the co-director of the Center for Child and Family Studies and director of the program for infant and toddler care at WestEd in California. He's been researching the effects of the environment on baby and toddler brains for 46 years. This is his entire thing. And he actually started the 0 to 3 program, if you're familiar with that program. And really what Ron has felt over the years is he sees very clearly through his research that certain things needed to happen in order to support babies and mothers to have better brain outcomes. And he came up with, I'd call it, a list of things that he felt like, and some of them were policy-oriented, that needed to be done in order to do that. So he came to us and said, hey, we really don't know anything about social media. I've been a researcher my whole life, but what I really want to do is launch this program. And we came up with the For Our Babies program, which is a call for better beginnings. And really what the goal was is to get people to sign up for the download, the newsletter, so that he could then connect with them and communicate with them, and we could give them information about new research as it applied to each area in which he was going to be kind of focusing on. He wrote, one of the things that we tried to get them to do is sign our pledge, and the pledge was that they would work to help in the different areas of the mission. And we did. We had a really good number of people do that, like a couple hundred in the first couple of months. And then he ended up, over the time he's grown that list, and he still uses that email list several years later to really connect with people. And as different things come up in different states, like paid leave time for mothers and fathers, and those kinds of things, the For Our Babies initiative is involved in those things. And they're pointing their people toward those things and saying, hey, this is what's going on in the state. So it's become a really great thing. It's gone well beyond the state of California, and really been able to start to build calls to action, is what we call those, where we ask people to do certain things as we go along. So this became really an activist kind of thing, and you may not want to go all the way to that, but what I thought was interesting is that he brought a really interesting topic to light. So people, what's the second part? The first part of our goal post is people. Who are you helping? And that becomes really critical. But what you want to ask yourself are these three questions. Who is going to benefit the most from your research? Who is benefiting from that? Who else would have an interest in knowing what you're doing with your research? So your peers, like what kinds of other researchers? Are they in your field? Are they next to you in your field? What are they? And what do you know that most other people don't? And that's a weird third question, I know. But here's the thing. All of you know things that most people in the world these days don't know. You have what I call a superpower. You know things that you think everybody should know. You think, why doesn't everybody know this? And really that's your area where you can help people to understand things that they may not ever understand any other way. So if you're reaching a more broad audience than just researchers, other researchers, this could become really critical because you have something that you can offer that nobody else has that might really pique the interest of people. And you might be surprised at what that is. You may not think of yourself as magnetic or anything like that, but the bottom line is that you know stuff that I definitely don't know, and I would love to know what you know. So I know a lot of times you want to think about who you're trying to reach and what it is that you know that would be super interesting to them. And if you don't know the answer to that third question, I would suggest sitting down with some of those people and asking them, like, why is it that you come to me? Why are you interested in what we do? And see what they have to say. It could just be people around you. It can even be somebody that's just a casual observer of your career. Staff them. Like, what is it that you think that we have that might be interesting to other people? So there you go. And then once you figure out who the people are that you're going to reach, then you need to set your objectives. And I have seen a lot of goals so far. But what I would like to talk about now is objectives, which are those very specific items that you need to come up with in order to pull together to know if you've ever made it to the end. So we call them SMART goals, and I'm sure all of you know what a SMART goal is. If you don't know what a SMART goal is, that's fine, but if you do, let me know in the chat that, yes, I've heard of SMART goals before. That is like old hat to me. But I'm going to let you know real quick for those of you who don't. SMART, the S stands for specific. We're not vague. You want specific goals that aren't vague. You want them to be measurable. They have to have numbers attached to them. I have researchers in the room. I'm hoping amongst all of you, you're not afraid like my communications and PR and marketing crowds are of numbers. So they have to have numbers attached to them. They have to be attainable. They don't want to be too easy or too hard to achieve. You want to be R, which is results oriented, which means they're tied to your business goals or to your research goals. And time bound. They have a time frame by which they can be accomplished. So I always say, how many of X do I need to achieve by X date? So how many by when? How many of these do I need by what date? That's probably the easiest way to set a SMART goal. Yay, Judy likes SMART goals. Yes, so does Barbara. Good. Okay, so SMART goals really are about setting like specific number goals. So if you want to reach other researchers with your research, how many do you want to reach and like in what fields? I think that's even more interesting. Do you want to do it in cross fields, in the similar fields? You can say, I want to talk to at least 3 other researchers who have an interest in this topic by the end of the 4th quarter of 2016, for example. That would be one goal that you could set. There they are, SMART goals. And by the way, I'm going to give you something. I think they said you could download these on the site, and I think that's what I heard Stephen say. So hopefully you'll be able to download these and look at these later. One of the things I always like to talk about is, as far as goals go, objectives. What is the jump for joy test for you? Like if it happened in your research, you would be like, yes, like winning a big grant, or is it like getting a certain number of people to join a trial or a whatever you're doing? What would really make you jump for joy? Think about that and like back up from that and say, how can we get that to happen using not just social media, but other channels as well? What is a jump for joy test for you? I'd love to hear some of those on the side. I don't see any jump for joys or numbers. So if you can think of one, it'd be awesome. I'm going to give you an example of one guy that we worked with out of MD Anderson who really had a jump for joy situation on his hands. He was working for MD Anderson. He's now at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and he has become known really amongst the industry as somebody who is just a social media doyen, if you will. A lot of people look to him as a doctor who has embraced social media in a way that has completely skyrocketed his career and all of his research. So his name is Anis Jonas, and he is a doctor at Memorial Sloan Kettering. But when he was at MD Anderson, he had some issues. His area of study is lymphoma, and he had some issues with getting people to enroll in his clinical trials. And he needed to have enough people in the clinical trial in order for the clinical trial to go. And so that was his goal. And along with that, at the time, MD Anderson had just launched its CancerWise blog. And so he went ahead and started blogging on CancerWise. And he also started a Facebook page where he talked about the latest research, his and others, in the area of lymphoma research. And he was putting that out there, and of course, he was following HIPAA and all of those other things. We can talk about those kind of drawbacks here a little bit later, but all of that was kind of handled through MD Anderson at the time. And he just started to become an expert, or well known as an expert on this topic. And the key was that his fans were highly motivated to know what he was talking about because they either had family members or they themselves were suffering from lymphoma. And so one of the things I find really interesting about him is at the time, he had a modest but respectable community. He had about 617 followers on his Facebook fan page and about 1,500 on Twitter, and he'd been doing that for about a year. And that's not bad for a busy doctor. I mean, you and I might look at that and say, that's not that great of a number when you see people with 30, 40, 50,000 followers on Twitter or whatever. But the key was, and I said this earlier, that his fans were highly motivated by his topic. He was the go-to guy. He quadrupled the number of patients in his clinical trials in that first year, just using social media, the only difference that he had made in his communication channels. He was doing everything else the same, but social media made all the difference. So an unexpected benefit, I'm sure, for him has been that he has benefited from his social media adoption in his career. He was hired as the chief of lymphoma services for Memorial Sloan Kettering just 3 years after his foray into social media. And, you know, as a method for reaching clinical trial patients, it was something that had really never been done before. So if you do a quick search for Eunice in social media, it'll bring up scores of articles from other doctors who've been inspired by his adoption of social media. I really enjoyed reading all of these different little articles, and I found it really inspiring that this man who really, I mean, social media is obviously not the first thing on his mind every day, but he used it in such a way to completely transform his career and also help a lot of people. So I found that really, really interesting. So,
Cami, sorry to interrupt. This is Stephen. We have a couple questions in the chat box I wanted to just bring to your attention. John Kramer asked that he has a question about, is paying for reach worth it? So on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, they all have paid options for advertisements and things like that. He's curious on how that works into strategy and objectives.
Sure. And I mean, that's a very specific question about one channel or two. Facebook, I think it's worth it. Sometimes we do it in Twitter, but the reason I think it's worth it in Facebook is because they have severely limited who you can reach. So what I like about Facebook is that you can pinpoint almost to like a zip code your audience, who you would like to reach. And so, yeah, I do believe it's because it is so targeted, I do believe that you should use it, and I do all the time. But it doesn't have to cost a lot. Like, for example, I have like targeted audiences, and we only run like maybe $5 worth of ads a day during a specific period of time. So, I mean, you know, $50 to $100 on Facebook can get you in front of the people that, exactly the people that you want to reach, which I find to be pretty great considering. I mean, if you put like a billboard up, you don't know who's going to even see that or go buy it, you know, versus like, you know, an ad in a newspaper or on television even. You have some ideas, but this thing becomes very targeted. Like you can target down to their interests, what publications they read. You can target down to their location, their just almost anything. It's pretty powerful actually. And since, you know, a huge number of the population, what it was at the beginning, what 70-something odd % of the population are on Facebook right now, especially in the United States, it's a really powerful way to reach people. So yes, I would say you can, but only if you're very targeting people, not just spraying it out there and hitting the boost button.
Thank you. And that kind of leads into a second question that we had from Pegnozic is, what if your audience is resistant or even hostile towards, you know, the messaging that you're having, or they're just difficult to get a hold of?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I know that we have an ongoing contract with an organization called Bio. And I don't know if you guys know who Bio is, but some people don't like them very much. And so we do get a lot of negative comments. I mean, so negative comments will happen on social media. You just need to like beware and be ready for them. I would say that I've unfortunately spent most of my career working through negative comments and dealing with that on social media. But here's the thing, they're going to talk about you negatively anyway, whether you have a channel or don't have a channel. I mean, if they're against what you're doing, they're going to talk about it in their own groups and so on. What social media gives you is a voice. It gives you a voice that you don't have otherwise, because they'll just talk about you anyway. And it also gives you an opportunity to get people who will support what you're doing and who are interested in what you have to say. So yeah, it takes a little bit of effort whenever you have a controversial topic, I would say. But
great.
Yeah,
Thank
I can
you.
maybe do a follow-up on that later. So moving on to strategy really quickly, and that's part of maybe even when you talk about crisis communication and are you going to be attacked and all that kind of stuff, and those concerns, which I think are fair. Really what you want to think about here is community. I've always found that if you build a community in social media rather than just spray out messages, people tend to be much more connected with you. I mean, that's just something that you would feel the same way if somebody was just, you know, spraying messages at you all day. And we get that all the time with advertising now. Pretty soon you just start tuning that out, or even sometimes you can feel irritated by it. So you want to create a place, if you're on social media, where people want to interact with you because you're going to be human, you're going to be open-minded, you're going to have like a conversation with them. So one of the strategies that I like the most, and I have to be really honest, is community building. Other strategies are thought leadership, you know, like Honest did, where Dr. Eunice did, where he was really out there putting out a lot of really quality information that people couldn't find really anywhere else, and they could trust him. That's the thing. I mean, you can go out and, you know, Google lymphoma, and I have lymphoma, and I have B-cell, and I have this, and I have that, but, you know, they trusted him because he had the knowledge. You know, he was actually the kind of person that would, you know, look at this content and he would know if it was bogus or if it was something that people could use. So I think that that's really, really important to look at that. And she said, Paul says, joining a community might be a bit more efficient than building a community from scratch. It's true. Joining communities are a great way to start. Building one from scratch is tough, but I will tell you that you will end up building a smaller community around yourself, even if you're in another community. So building a community should just be a mindset rather than like necessarily a big effort. So you want to think about yourself as being a part of a community for sure, either way. When you go out there, it's almost like, you know, if you met somebody for the first time, you wouldn't shove your card and say, hey, you know, call me and because I'm the right person for this job. You would first talk to them and find out what their needs were, and then you'd see if you fit. So strategy becomes really important in that way. And I do like the community strategy, even if you're joining a community, because there's going to be a smaller subset of that community that cares about what you're talking about. And partnership building is also really important. There may be other communities out there that you might want to partner with or talk to and see if they might want to join with you. Education and awareness are another strategy, and that can be done inside of the community building strategy even. You know, so you may be going out into social media with the thought that, you know, my job out here is to educate, like, and build awareness, not about my place of, and I think somebody's goal was, you know, for more people to know about your organization, which is awesome. But the way that people are going to know about your organization is if they know that, oh my goodness, you know, I forget who it was who said that. You can pipe up if you want to, but Susan, or I don't remember who it was. But so-and-so is the person that I know knows about this. And then you just happen to work at that organization, and then they get to know that organization through the fact that you are in that organization. So in the end of the day, in social media, people want to talk to people, not companies or organizations or institutions. That's just not who they're interested in talking to. They're interested in having an inside person in that institution. They're not necessarily interested in talking to the institution itself. So even if you have an institution's social media presence, which is definitely what everybody does, make sure that it has a voice that people feel like they know the person behind that institutional account, if you will. So let me see. I want to keep up here, Stephen, but maybe if you can keep up with me if there's any other questions, that's great. I just don't want to pause for too long. So I want to talk a little bit about Marianne and what was really interesting about her and why I'm bringing this to you. And I actually had a really great conversation with her about this research that she did. She is at the University of Toronto, and she is doing some air pollution and emissions research. And, you know, that can get very, like, backroom sort of thing. And they came up with this really great idea to map out the air quality in different parts of the city and just kind of look at that. And she did it in Toronto first, and then she moved it on to Montreal. But what was interesting about this is that along the way, she was doing this research, and one of her goals was to find out how this pollution kind of thing was impacting the people in the city. And she thought bicyclists, because they're outside all the time. You know, they're outside, you know, basically exercising and covering a wide part of the city on their bikes and so on. So she wanted to put out a research study to find out what people thought, and also to get some feedback on her research on the street map and sort of what people, if people thought it was useful and they could use it. And this tool will show the cleanest and the quietest route for cyclists in these major cities right now, Toronto and Montreal. I think she wants to move on to some other places as well, and she's actually in talks with people around the United States in the U.S. proper to do some of this. And she wanted to put out a research study about it. And so she, with her very, very small, and I mean small, Twitter following, and she has under 200 followers on Twitter, about 200, she tweeted a link to the research study to ask people, you know, how is pollution affecting you and that kind of thing. Well, a media outlet in Toronto saw her tweet and thought it was interesting as a story. And he followed up with her, and he did run a story about her research and about the study. And from there, the BBC and quite a few other organizations picked up that story and ran it internationally to talk about her little research study, all from one tweet on an account that had 200 followers. But clearly it had the right followers. You know, the people that were following her were people that had an interest in this topic and maybe were on that beat. Maybe some media. And one of the things I loved about what Marianne said was that she doesn't really care about the media coverage. I mean, obviously it's been good for her and the university. And by the way, how it even got blown up further is that the university noticed that it had been covered in the media, and then they took it up as well, and then they also started to promote it to a wider media audience. So even in her own university, she got some more visibility, which was important to her as well, because they're always looking at programs and, you know, what to cut, what to keep. So that was really important to her. And she said to me, quite frankly, she goes, I don't care at all about the media coverage. Like, I'm not interested in being like some famous person. But she said, because all of that media coverage happened, several other researchers from around the world, some overseas in Europe, some in North Carolina, some in New York City, some in all around the world, called her. And they were doing something similar, and they started to talk. So she's actually completely widened her circle on this research because of one tweet. So I'm just going to let you know that it doesn't have to be really sophisticated. It just has to be heartfelt. And you know, if you go and look at her Twitter account, you'll see it's pretty basic, and she has like information up about her research, and she often tweets out pictures of the sensors that they're putting up and things like that. So I mean, it's nothing like too dramatic. It's very simple, but she's definitely done a great job doing this for herself and her organization. And then finally, tactics. Usually people start with the tactics and then they roll it up from there. That's why I brought you guys through this framework. This is definitely a communications framework I just showed you. And if you follow this framework, I feel like you're going to be a lot better off than most people in social media, even people that are supposedly know what they're doing. So if you start with your goal and you find your people, your objectives, your strategies, and then finally roll up your tactics, this is where you're going to be able to find out, you know, what exactly the steps you need to take in order to start working on that. So are you going to use Facebook and maybe some targeted advertising? Really interesting. I don't know. You know, you're going to have to think about, can you reach your audience through that? So I would suggest, if you're interested in Facebook, going in there and starting a Facebook advertising account and looking at different audiences and seeing if you can narrow down on the audience that you really, really want. And like I said, you know, if you ever have any questions about that, you can always send me a quick email or anything like that. Another way that people are using social media as researchers is a primary research. This is really interesting stuff, but people are using data for research projects because so many people are out there talking about their true feelings, or at least sometimes their true feelings, there maybe all kinds of things that are going on. And so what's happened is that researchers are starting to scoop up all of this information and use it to see if, you know, they can come up with novel and new, unique approaches to different kinds of things. So one of the things that is really interesting is that every minute of every day, approximately 350,000 tweets, 293,000 Facebook statuses, and 400 hours worth of YouTube videos are uploaded to the web. I mean, that's just a lot of data. So that big data is being harvested, and this can be kind of scary in one way for us as a society, and in another way, they're trying to use it for other kinds of interesting things. A team of researchers from France and Canada that's led by Diana Inkpen of the University of Ottawa. She is engineering a test that is a predictive model to analyze social media data that helps detect and monitor individuals potentially at risk for mental health issues. Very interesting. The project has received a 3-year grant right now of about $400,000 from the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada. And the announcement I was looking at said that they basically are going to be doing this to find out, you know, what people's moods are, their activities and social interactions, and they're going to use these novel algorithms to really just look at who might be at risk. So these sort of early warning systems on social media are starting to crop up everywhere. Right now they're pretty crude in the sense that, you know, a lot of the social media platforms are putting buttons on there and saying, are you feeling sad? And people are able to report their mental illness or their suicidal thoughts immediately through different kinds of channels on social media. So I do find that it's going to be interesting, and I think psychologists and psychiatrists eventually might look at this. And we can talk about the ethics of this. It can be a little bit scary, I think. But this is definitely coming along. This is happening as we speak. And I actually have a whole other slide about ethics right here. Oh, and John says they're using Facebook to conduct qualitative research and looking at using Messenger as a way to engage folks more personally in online research. Yeah, so these are the kinds of things that are really starting to happen. You have that ability to connect with people immediately, and that didn't exist. Even 5 years ago, I mean, I've been doing this since 2005 when I started my blog. And even, in 2005, which I guess, a little bit over 10 years ago, we could not do this. And even then it was like seemed very powerful. And now it just seems like, there's just such an opportunity to connect and use these channels in a positive way, not just a marketing way, like to kind of shape people to buy your stuff. I mean, I think there's a really good opportunity here to shape the environment to help people connect with who they need to connect with in order to get the help they need or to get the information they need. So I do find this really super interesting in general. So again, I said at this point it's probably a good idea to mention that ethics and the law should be considered in social media, and I do think the law is well behind in social media right now. Social media is moving faster than the law really can. So participant and consent awareness become really important with social media research, and most research boards will allow the collection of public data without consent at this time because people are making these statements in a public arena. I am not a lawyer and I do not play one on TV, but that is kind of current practice. Also HIPAA, I talked about that earlier. I don't know how many of you deal with that at all, but you can't release patient information without their express permission. We do a lot of work for hospital systems, and one of the things that we kind of play hard and fast by is that if somebody comes onto a page and they talk about their own illness, that's permissible, whereas if somebody comes on the page and talks about somebody else's illness that isn't their minor child or that they don't have like permission to do so, then you have to delete it. So we usually delete those things off of our Facebook page. If somebody comes and says, my husband has gout, that's something we would probably hide from the timeline, and then we'd reach out to that person and tell them that, that we felt because they were talking about somebody else's illness that we couldn't show that. If they wanted to rephrase it, we'd be happy to unhide it for the page. So it's going to be difficult. And we've got some hesitation. The reason and I don't know if I'm saying this right, but RADA, maybe? The reason I hesitate to use social media is because I may not be able to get them immediate medical attention if they need, and just, in case some conversation causes distress or suicidal thoughts, yeah. I mean, that is a very, very good point that you're going to have to do. And thank you for the HIPAA link. That's great, Joanne. And yes, the reason that you would hesitate is for that reason. So you would need something in place like that if you had that kind of service. A suicide helpline that was national or wherever you're at. I don't know what countries everybody here is from, if everybody's from the U.S. or from different parts of the world here. So I would say that is very wise of you not to get into the weeds with someone unless you have the support to give them. All right, so moving right along, I think we're running out of time here. Finally is measure. So we want to learn what is working, and the best way to learn what's working is by making those really, really strong objectives. We talked about them earlier because when you reach them, you know you did. So you can say, if I want to double my my number of people who come to me for whatever, XYZ, and you only get in about half of the number of people that you expected, then you can look back and say, okay, why isn't this working? Is this channel not the right channel for us? Do we need to use other kinds of communication? Is social media really what we need to use? But then look at Marianne. She couldn't really predict that every single media outlet, major media outlet in the world would cover her her research at the University of Toronto. I mean, that's unheard of. So you can't necessarily make that your goal, but her goal could have been having a certain number of people fill out her survey, and she did have that goal, and she did meet that goal. So that is the kind of thing that you want to put out there. And then those exceptional things that happen by serendipity in social media, and you will find that if you spend too much time in social media or any amount of time, that these kinds of occasions do occur. Those are not going to necessarily be the ones that you put up as your objective. And then I have sort of 5 things I usually measure for social media. I measure the activity that we put out, like how many tweets are we putting out, or how many things are we doing, because I want to see, like, if I put out 5 tweets, does it give me so much more engagement than, say, 2 a week? So you want to kind of adjust your amount until it's exactly what works for you. Like, yeah, we're getting a lot of notice out of this. We're kind of connecting with people. Things seem to be moving. You don't have to necessarily be out there every 5 seconds, tweeting. So activity is only important insofar as it drives some of these other things below it, which are things like attention. And attention becomes kind of interesting because that's like how many people are following you. And a lot of people look at attention metrics as one of the main metrics that they look at. The problem with attention metrics only is they don't really tell you what people are doing. They only tell you what people are, like if they're following you, which doesn't necessarily mean anything. So you definitely want to look at that. And attention really is about the reach or the opportunities to see. So those are the opportunities that people have to see you, so out there, which brings awareness. So that attention over time, as you build it, will bring awareness. And that is all about their engagement with you. So are people actually responding to you? Are they commenting on your stuff? Are they connecting with you? Are they giving you private messages and asking you to connect about your specific research topic or about what you're writing about? That's the awareness piece on social media anyway. And then attitude and advocacy. I also put advocacy with this. That's where people start to advocate what you do. Their attitudes towards you are changing. This is also where you can look at the negative attitudes as well. It's called sentiment analysis. How many people are negative to your cause versus positive to your cause? There are some tools that exist out there, which I actually have for you. At the end, I will give you a way to get a list of tools that do some of these things. And then these lead to actions. And actions are so important. They really are the bottom line of what we're trying to get people to do. In the end, it's really about people, what people feel about you and how many people come to see your online properties and interact with you and sign up for something or want to have further contact with you in some way in order to push forward the research that you do. So these are kind of the ways that I look at measurement. It's not just one only, like attention, and I'll probably look at several of these for any given project that we do. Awareness may not be important for some, but attitude may be really huge. Sentiment might be huge, like especially if it's a real controversial thing, they may want to know if they shift in sentiment over time. It's are more people talking about them in a positive way. And I've done that a lot with technology companies. Network Solutions was one that I worked with for a long time, and they had a lot of negativity in the developer community towards their product, and we worked on it over time where we shifted that away from being negative to being more positive by just being out there, having a community, giving them resources, just being there for them. And then a couple of things that I want to go on, and I call this the R's of social media engagement. And I actually call it the 5, even though you only see 4 here, because there's one at the end that you don't see. But you read, meaning you go out there and you look at what other people are doing. So before you get jumping headlong in, follow a few people that you admire, that you would like to be connected with, and read what they say. Look at what they're saying. Look at a few people in your audience type and see what their interests are. Before we jump in, let's read. Then reach out. Reach out to them and share things that share your thought leadership. And then reciprocate. When they are putting stuff out, why don't you go ahead and put some things out, create some things. So reaching out and sharing is going to be things like things that you know about that they're doing, And then reciprocating is actually going out and sharing some of their information, some of the research they do in addition to your own research. And then respond. That's engaging. Really engage with the people that you're out there with. And I know that some of that's going to feel very hard and take much time and all of that, but I promise you that this is going to be the most successful, probably, relationships that you're going to build in your career, and not just in your local area, but I mean, expand it out. I mean, there's people that I work with now that I never thought I would work with in a million years, and it's all due to really connecting with them in social media and responding. And then the fifth one is repeat. You have to do it over and over again, so you never, ever arrive in social media. I mean, every day it's changing. So you need to always follow through the cycle. Always be open to your community, read what they have to say, reach out to them, share their stuff, reciprocate, create things that are interesting to your community that they want, and then respond to them. Really respond to them. Take some time to do that. So that's all of my roundabout. And I am open to more questions. I have about 5 minutes to take them, too. So if you have something very specific, like a Facebook question, I can answer that now.
Well, thank you very much, Tammy. There was some discussion about a few of the factors involved in primary research using social media. Mm-hmm. Some of those things that we're talking about in the chat were issues with the IRB or Institutional Review Board, or right. How do you handle something like disclosure in a Twitter chat where it goes by really quickly? So any thoughts about how to handle different aspects of primary research in terms of participant engagement?
And I spoke very quickly, but what I was trying to say is that most IRB boards, or most IRBs, are right now saying it's okay to use like what's already out there as research. But what isn't probably okay is manipulating that. So I mean, there was a lot of controversy around what Facebook did vis-a-vis, they were serving up more positive content and more negative content to certain groups of people to see how it affected what they did, like how often they posted and things like that. And that, I think, people were really outraged by that because they felt manipulated, right? So, I mean, I don't know what your IRB will say, but I would suggest, obviously, running anything by them before you do any, primary research. She said that, Rebecca said, we've had that with sexual violence disclosure and focus groups. Oops, it just kind of moved when I did that. Let me go back there. That was interesting, Rebecca. And I just lost it because it moved. Oh, yeah. But we don't want to discourage people from disclosing just because we don't want to be responsible. Yeah, okay, so we were talking, this kind of leads off of not having things in place to help with people that have a problem if they start to get kind of melt down, right? So especially when you're talking about people and their feelings and online and just the concern with suicide. I mean, in the end of the day, I mean, I'll tell you a story that's personal, but I won't tell you who it is exactly, but there was a person that happened to be in my family who called me all the way from across the United States to tell me that he was having suicidal thoughts and feelings. And so, I'm not trained to do anything with somebody who has suicidal thoughts and feelings. And so, I called a suicide helpline in that area where he was. I actually looked it up while I was talking to him and found one, and I actually called them, and they said he has to call us, and so I gave him the number, and he called them. So, I mean, there are resources out there that aren't yours, That's, guess, what I'm going to put there. And I certainly am not going to push anybody to do something they're uncomfortable with. If you're not comfortable with that right now, and I do agree, Rebecca, I mean, disclosure, especially when it comes to sexual violence, I mean, this is a huge piece of, healing for these people and also for all kinds of justice issues. So I think it's a great conversation. If anybody else has something else to add to it, I'd love to hear it.
Thanks. John had a comment or a question about using privacy language as a sticky at the top of your page so that new participants, when they're added to a group, I'm assuming, will be able to see that.
Yeah, so I think that's excellent. And I guess I should have said that in here. And so thank you for that reminder, because we always do that. We actually put the rules of the game in the top of groups. And one of the things he's bringing up right now is a private Facebook group and the difference between a Facebook page and a Facebook group. And I'm sure many of you know this. I don't want to, dumb this down for anybody, but for those that don't understand this, there are two places on Facebook where you can interact, but three really, that you can interact with people. Number one is your own personal page, which I don't suggest you do that, except for maybe sharing your research there, because that's actually kind of cool, because people that know you might find it interesting, and you might not even know that they would find it interesting. Number two is a public institutional, as they call it, a fan page, and that really is a place to share research. It's a place to share the kinds of things that people might be interested in, but it's not necessarily a place to get into the weeds about somebody. Although I have seen on our hospital pages that it can get really interesting. We put up a really great thing about somebody, like a nurse. So we'll put up saying, hey, this nurse was, you noticed me, you put in a card about this nurse, because we have cards out for all of our employees so that they can write up the employee and say, hey, this person did a great job. And so we'll pull those out and we'll actually run them on our Facebook page, and that often gets huge amounts of people saying, when I was in the hospital and she came in or he came in and it was so helpful to me, and they give a really great testimonial about that person, and obviously they share their own personal information in doing so. Those are okay. Those are all feel good. But then there's also Facebook groups, and Facebook groups can be set in three different ways. You can set them as open, which anybody can join, so that's a little bit like a page, but not quite. They can be set as what we call closed, which means that you have to be able to be invited into that group. So somebody has to have given you the link and said, here is the link to our group, why don't you join us? And a lot of institutions are using these closed groups as a way to connect with people that have a specific illness, ailment, whatever, disability or anything like that, that they want to talk to each other. So I would say Baylor White, who we worked with up in Dallas, did that. They have some groups like that of teens that have specific disabilities that talk to each other about them. And then the third kind is a super secret group, which in that case, the person has to be your friend on Facebook to join. And so I would say closed groups are probably the way that I would go. And then at the top of them, you do need to have a disclaimer, and you can pin them on top. So like any post that you have in your group, if you just pull down the little arrow that's on the side of any post in Facebook, it gives you a little thing that says pin to top if you are an administrator of that group, and you can pin that thing up there. And yes, people need to know what the ground rules are when they come into a group. So they know how things are going to, kind of flow from there. So that's a really great point. Thank you very much for bringing it up.
Thank you.
John?
One other question that I had that I think has come up in some other discussions is, in reaching out to various audiences, how do you connect, or do you have any strategies you'd recommend for connecting with rural audiences who may not be actively as involved or have as much access to the online community?
Did you say rural?
Yes, I'm sorry, rural.
Like out in the country?
Yes.
I mean, okay. So yes, they may not be as connected. I would say, my whole family are farmers, and they're all very rural, and they're all incredibly connected. They're on Facebook, they have their phones, and they're constantly talking to me on Facebook. One of them is always asking me to play casino bingo with her. So I know this is very specific, but if you're going to be talking to rural communities and you're worried about them not having internet access, then you probably need to think about a, in-person, mail campaign even. But I would be surprised. Do some research on Facebook and see how many people you can pull in a specific rural area. That's the cool thing about the Facebook advertising. In Ad Manager, it's called Ad Manager, Facebook Ad Manager. Ad Manager will let you dig down to even zip codes. So you can see how many people are connected in the zip code and what are their interests and so on. So I don't want to beg to differ with you, because I know you guys have some information, maybe I don't, but generally speaking, you're going to have to use different tactics for different audiences, just like anything else. These are tactics. So social media are tactics. It's just a really powerful tactic. Oh, and by the way, you have the slide here. It says text cool tools, the 44222. If you do that, I have a whole bunch of tools that I use for social media. And if you want me to explain them to you, just call me or whatever. But 44222 is the texting number, and then you just put cool tools in the body of the text, hit it, and it'll send you my tools. So you can have those.